Welcome back, Mr. Bayo. Rotimi joins us now. He's a financial analyst, also to weigh in on what and how we should be proceeding to boost the economy. Thank you for coming on again today.
Always a pleasure.
Well, I know that they say capital is a coward that flees when it's threatened, and then now we're trying to see what can we do to reflate the economy or just ensure things go well. I know that those who've lost their jobs, but what can possibly be done? Do you see us coming out of this by September as being touted?
I think, as the last speaker said, it's a lot quicker going down the slope than it is climbing back up. I think a turnaround by September is optimistic at best. But having said that, I think a lot of lessons must be learnt about how we got to where we are and what we need to do to get out of it. So from your news items today, 55% drop in revenues, over ₦1 trillion. That's a significant part of our national budget that has not been realized. And the reasons are not far-fetched, and they have been rehashed on this forum several times. So I would like to focus on what next and how we get out of here. I believe first and foremost, government is meant to be an enabler of business. Government is meant to create the right environment for business enterprise, for private sector entities to thrive. So maybe where we are now, government needs to go back to the drawing board and say, how do I get out of areas I have no business being in the first place? Government is running a lot of businesses that it does not have the capacity and the competence to run. We are wasting scarce national resources, keeping certain industries running when they should purely and totally and completely be privatized, so that the burden of funding, managing and growing those businesses moves away from the Nigerian taxpayer to the private sector. So privatization has to be focused on significantly. The public-private partnership, we've been talking about it for a long time. This is the time government has to actually show the political will and the leadership that is required to make this happen. Public-private partnerships can only succeed in an environment where there is the rule of law, there is a legal and regulatory framework, there is sanctity of contracts. A lot of people are a bit hesitant about doing business with the public sector simply because they believe somebody can wake up tomorrow morning and reverse a transaction or a project that they have already embarked on. So I think we need to get the legal, the regulatory framework sorted out, encourage private sector entities to bring the money, because the government does not have the money. So that ship has sailed already. So where we are at now, the focus should be on how do we create an environment that encourages private sector investment to get us out of this hole that we are in.
You know, I think he was on this program, former Delta Governor Doan, where he was talking about what he's seen, that in developing countries, government is the biggest spender. And this has been the case over the years. And are we actually doing anything to ensure that this changes? Because if they don't spend, there's a squeeze.
That is the problem. I think fundamentally our economy has not been running in an optimal manner. When you have the government, the public sector, being the primary driver of practically all economic activity, then when that entity suffers a loss of revenue, the entire nation is in trouble. So what we need actually is a shift of emphasis, and let the private sector, who are properly equipped, who have the capital or access to capital, to actually drive that growth. You know, government should set the rules. Government should ensure compliance with set rules and regulations and all of that. So that really is the role of government. Government should not be an economic player to the sense that they must find money and make every investment by themselves. They should just create an enabling environment to allow private sector capital to come.
Let me get my boy.
For some Nigerians, they're very skeptical about, that word privatization, or in some instances, public-private partnership. And in many instances, we've seen the private sector kick, beg your pardon, labor, civil society organizations kick. Do you think that the way privatization has gone on, especially with what we've seen in some critical sectors of the economy, that privatization process has engendered confidence in the Nigerian people?
Thank you very much, Malkwe. I think what we need to look at is first and foremost, how have previous privatization transactions been run? There has been, let's take the telecoms, let's take the power sectors. The very first step has to be a review of the legal and the regulatory framework. So for the telecom sector, an NCC was created before private sector participants were asked to come and bid for GSM licenses. For the power sector also, there was an energy sector reform bill, which became an act and then thereafter. Now, some of the failures or the challenges we've seen with privatization in Nigeria is not because there is something wrong with privatization in theory. The challenge has always been with regard to how we have implemented it. Have we stuck by the rules and regulations? Have we insisted that it's only the people or the bidders that have the requisite technical and financial capacity are the ones that have actually emerged as the preferred bidders of these various national assets? So what we, the Nigerian people, need to do is to ensure that the government functionaries who are charged with privatization, the BPE and to some extent the National Assembly and the federal government, that they stick by the rules. And when we see a variation from the rules, then we need to voice it out and make a lot of noise about it. So there is nothing in theory wrong with privatization if it is done right. Because in the instances where it has worked, in the banking sector, for example, even the so-called the telecom sector we've talked about, those are examples of where privatization has worked previously.
Let me take you back to we left off with Mr. Osarako, and it has to do with the inclusion of private sectors, in the economic team. Do you think that would have helped better, or you still think that they can also help by sharing the ship from outside?
My view is that private sector participation is critical. I differ from the position of Mr. President, who feels that private sector members of the economic team will simply be furthering their own personal objectives. Again, it is a function of what framework have you prescribed for the members of the economic management team to work within. If you set clear guidelines, clear framework, clear deliverables and targets, then it is difficult for individuals to come in and want to abuse the process. My view is that, yes, there are competent people inside of government, but there are also a lot of competent people outside of government who government should leverage on in terms of sharing their knowledge, their expertise, and their experience. So I think it will be doing Nigeria a disservice to exclude such a critical group from discussions about our economy and how to move the economy forward.
I was speaking to someone yesterday, and he also pointed out to me.
But for some people, they...
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So guys, for some people they differentiate between liberalization and privatization. Now for some of the areas you've mentioned, they talked about the telecom sector, for instance. They say that that sector was liberalized. Only one government entity, I think NITEL, was privatized, and we're yet to see it fully get off the ground. Some of the power companies that were privatized, some people are, people are still skeptical as to the results of the privatization that we've seen so far. So I ask again, do you think that, the process that we've seen so far has engendered confidence in the Nigerian people? Are you confident that government itself, would live up to its promise, or can actually ensure that the process is free, fair, and transparent?
Thank you very much. Again, I reiterate that my personal view is that privatization is a critical tool. I think it is something that, particularly where we are today as a nation, you have the federal government still running the NNPC, you have the federal government running transmission, you have the federal government in pipelines and all of that. The truth is that we lack the resources to actually run those entities effectively. Now, you talk about the power privatization and some of the bad press that it has gotten. Now, again, we need to look at this particular situation a lot closer. Those who have emerged as preferred bidders, were they the most competent technically? Did they have the deepest pockets in terms of financial resources? If the answer is yes, then the government has done its bit. If the answer is no, if they got in through other means apart from the right ways, then Nigerians have the right to ask for a review of that process. But you must also recall that before the privatization, there was the energy sector review that took place. And one of the results from that particular legislation was that the prices of critical inputs such as gas and all of that had to be reviewed. The prices at which power companies sell their power must be at a rate that allows them to cover their costs. But when you have a situation where even government entities are owing the power companies hundreds of billions of naira and they are not paying, when you have a situation where the distribution companies cannot get power to distribute, the generation companies, because of lack of gas, cannot get gas to generate power. So I don't think it is a fault of privatization. I think there are some environmental factors that we need to address.